We've done a prompting working session before where we actually do a bunch of demoing of, how to develop a prompt. We're actually going to mostly spend the time in talking about prompting today. And we will likely we do one of our 3 session series that we're putting together and about to release. We'll actually go from like talking about prompting to really learning the skill of prompting. And the talking about actually is, I think, really important because uh, there is sort of a way to do it and why it's useful that way that I think is important to understand. And we also want you to feel like, because so many people I talk to feel like they're way behind on this whole AI thing. And I want to let you all know right away, like, everybody pretty much is a novice in this space still. And so wherever you're at, don't be stressed that you are just starting to do some of this stuff. And it's maybe hard to get to the learning process of it and practicing it. So we're here to help kind of move that forward, but don't stress about where you're at. We did a little bit of the intro, and we'll share this deck with you afterwards too, but you can read more about us there. Um, and we're going to move into sort of starting with the sort of arc of prompting evolution, which is a little bit, very light history lesson, but also starts to look forward on what's coming. Uh, and we'll start to move into, how we've moved from something basic to something much more complex. With that, I'll hand it to Will.
Thank you. As I go through this slide, I would appreciate if on the chat, could you let us know what's your prompting experience? So have you done nothing, a little bit, regularly? And there are more nuances, like a lot of work or personal. At this point, just whether you're at zero, you're at something once in a while. I kind of know what prompting is, and somebody who has been using it, whether for personal or for work. Just let us know what your prompting experience is. That might help us also uh, clarify some of the questions. This slide here, what we're trying to talk about is the evolution, right? How prompting has been growing. We're used to technology taking years. Like if you think about the first Excel and then the second version and the Windows whatever to 11 and the numbers that they're going, it's very progressively slow. AI, it's in the last 3 years. The stages that you see here are shifting sometimes every 6 months. So stage one, it's where we go through the understanding of just giving clear instructions rather just one sentence. How do I communicate? What is a quote unquote good prompt? Some of you might have heard prompt engineering as a concept. So that is the stage one of the evolution of what has happened with prompting, where we thought, let's give a very clear narrative, let's give clear examples. I won't read the slide, but that's basically stage one. Stage two of this prompting evolution came late 2024, early 2025, where people started realizing, let's move on from just a good instruction in a clear prompt to what it is context, right? What's the thinking part? Let's get the context right. Let's provide examples. Let's provide some background. Let's give the LLM some documents that they can look at. So this became a little bit more of this context engineering term, if some of you have heard it before, but that moves us into a second stage of evolution that has been going very strongly, driven mainly in the tech industry more than others. The rest of us cannot adopt these terminologies, but that has been that stage two of evolution, and I would say till late of 2025. Stage three is what we're experiencing now. And what we're seeing, if you have ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini on the paid subscriptions, Copilot if you're in the Microsoft ecosystem, Gemini if you're in the Google ecosystem, what you're starting to realize and see now is that that context thinking structure, it's serving you, but not to what you saw last year, that potential, the things that you see influencers talking about on their TikTok channels and whatever kids use these days. But it is more of this getting the process right. We're becoming orchestrators, we're managing workflows, and happy to dive into the more technical side. But it's basically being able to get a complex problem, break it down into pieces, know what do we feed the LLM and when, what we still do manually and what we don't, in order to get the best result possible from a tool, or a technology that is here to support the work that we do, rather than, oh, is it going to replace us, right? This is more, can we leverage it the best way possible? And that is started early this year. We're still in Q1 and we're seeing the evolution, but this is the trend that you will see when it comes to managing prompts.
And I'll just add, moving between each of these stages, for many of us, I think starts to happen naturally, where like stage one to stage two is also about like personifying what you're trying to accomplish. So the best way to think about it is like, oh, I now have an employee who is a researcher or a writer or an assistant who's very competent. And we started to sort of personify, and anytime you're managing well, you're giving them clear instructions. Here's your job description. Here's what you're supposed to accomplish. Like that's sort of what stage two became. And now it's stage three, as I've been thinking about it, is like we all, if we're that employee, have to operate across potentially multiple platforms. So it could be I'm doing this in Claude, which then needs to transition into my Google Workspace, which then needs to produce an output I can bring to a meeting. And that's what we mean by workflows. And we do it as professionals sort of naturally as we're going about our work. We're like, oh, I need to jump here, do this, do this. And the agents that are emerging in this work can actually move between platforms to accomplish multiple steps of a scope of work in your given day or week. And I know that's beyond where we're going to be today. We're gonna stay focused on the prompting part of it. Uh, but that's what's emerging right now is this sort of agentic workflow management. And the point of emphasis is there's good instruction for LLMs, but then there's process development and management that's really important to really maximize the sort of efficiency and effectiveness elements of using AI. So we'll keep working that through. We'll likely do a sort of workflow understanding and development uh, session at some point, but just wanted to sort of um, add a little emphasis there. And, again, don't stress. Most
Yes,
people are probably just getting to stage two. Some of the more advanced folks maybe at stage three and just figuring it out. But we're going to focus on the prompting today. And back to you, Will.
thank you. And I think the message that Ryan is sharing with you guys about not stressing is critical. I hear constantly people asking me, so where do I get certified? Do I get prompt engineering certification? Which of the prompt engineering courses do you recommend? And again, you've seen where the evolution is going. Having the practice is useful. Getting to understand how to write and communicate with an LLM is like learning a new language and communicating with another person. It's important, but you're not behind. You're not playing catch up. You don't have to go stage one, stage two, stage three. You could come in at stage two already, learning concepts and managing that and feel comfortable with it. You could come in at stage three and being an orchestrator as you pick up what you need from the other, because again, it's an evolution of the way that we use LLMs rather than 1 to 3 linear progression. And the reason why I say that it's because of this slide here. Something that the tech industry is trying to voice more and more, and yet not very successfully into other industries, is that yes, prompting is important, but it varies on your role. there is a clear divide between the edge leading adopters of LLMs, of AI, are always the tech industry, the developers, right? And we, the chatbot users, the ones that talk to ChatGPT and Claude, we follow a lot of what is happening in terms of terminology. The teaching, the instruction, the courses are being built for that left side of the screen, for the developers. Building system, that's why prompt engineering is critical. That's why coding, the hardness, it's so important because it is for you to be able to code and program and manage from that side of the room, an LLM. We are on the right side of the room. We're chatbot users, so we're producing outcomes, we're providing context, we're working the problem, not coding how to solve the problem. So that is an important distinction that I want you to keep in mind as you move forward, not only with the presentation, but in your career and in your process of learning about how to leverage AI to what makes sense to you, is that the terminology, the language being used is driven by the developer side of the equation. The user side has to be more mindful of, we want outcomes, we need to give good context, and we need to be working the problem with the chatbot. Very, very good and important distinctions to have, so you don't feel like you're playing catch up always, because otherwise, Ryan and I have easy more than 10,000 hours put into prompting, and we're playing catch up, it feels sometimes. So that's not the case if you're a chatbot user. So that is a very important distinction that we wanted to highlight.
Yeah. And the phrase like working the problem as an example is an iterative process. And that's where, one way to think about it is like, I still do this because I need the analog experience once in a while. Is stand in front of a whiteboard, get my ideas down, start to organize it. Uh, and now we have this AI tool, a chatbot experience where we can essentially brain dump, develop prompts, have this iterative process, sort of feel like we're erasing and reproducing. And that's what we do as professionals, who sort of work through thought processes, ideas, the way we're seeing things, the questions we have. That's what we mean by working the problem. And I think people understand context. It's why we have all day strategic planning sessions, is because we need to understand what is the community seeing and experiencing? What are the gaps we're seeing? What are the programs we're offering? What are the financials around what we provide? Like that's context that may be going into a thought process you're putting into AI to help you develop designs and plans and produce documents and PowerPoints and that sort of thing. I just want to pause and just see, are there questions, comments, further definitions on some of this terminology that would be helpful? We'll keep going and try to get more and more specific, but I just want to make sure people have an opening to jump in. All right.
Right.
This probably should move this slide a little earlier, actually. Just sort of a emphasis from, leading technology companies on the importance of prompting. And this movement toward agents. And the one I really want to call out actually is the IBM quote, where the last sentence there is autonomy without human direction is not a feature, it's a liability. And so even as we talk about moving from basic prompting to more role-based contextual prompting to workflow development that feels like we're starting to automate things, there is some efficiency and automation that can be created, but if it's without a human in the loop and oversight and validation and review, and sort of building ourselves into the system of that workflow, making sure it's not just like, okay, set it, forget it, and hope it all turns out for the best. That's where liability comes in just about every workflow. So if you become a very savvy user of agentic AI, and you get to, closer to automation, that's great. But if you forget to keep watching the work, the outputs, checking the process, I promise you it'll still start to falter and produce some risk for you. Will, I'll hand it back to you. You can start with this.
Thank you. These are basically the four very sticky points, the patterns that people are struggling the most when we have conversations about how do I use LLMs, how do I implement them in my organization, what is the potential, what it can do. And uh, very honestly, a lot of the pushback that we hear from leaders when they go, "Oh no, but I've talked to people and they talked about it's not working or it's not good enough, it doesn't do." These are the four more common concepts that we hear. That vague ask, basically, it's the way we have been seen on the news and online people use on their phone. Give me a recipe for my breakfast. Can you tell me what it we just have a Google on steroids. That is one of the big problems when you do transactionally one question and you expect a full developed answer um, that is missing. The second one, it's providing that context. You know your organization, you understand the challenges, you understand the nuance, the unwritten communication that happens with your stakeholders. The LLM doesn't. So when you ask a question, even if it is a well-structured question with everything you've read about what a good prompt is, if the context is not there, you're inviting the LLM to do what it's designed to do, which is probabilistic, deciding what's the probability that I get the right answer. So it's gonna take from a huge library things that for experts on your field sound like nonsense, but somebody who's not experienced go, this is plausible. So that's a big disconnect. I think tied to that, the one and done prompting that I already mentioned, one sentence done, I want the result. Why is this not giving me what I need? Rather than this is an iterative process and it's just the nature of it. And the tool mismatch and evolution uh, comes from, again, not understanding that at the end of the day, it's a technology, right? It is, even if it is a powerful tool, it's still a tool. And you're trying to use a hammer to do everything. There's some things that Claude is much better than ChatGPT, Gemini it's better, depending on the context and the situation. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to pay for all of them or have all of them under your organization, but it means that you have to be aware of the limitations, and where the LLM doesn't have everything, it will get you far enough that it's actually a benefit for your organization. Ryan, anything else that I might have missed there?
Yeah, I think on this last one on the tool mismatch and evolution, I have this conversation often too, which is, and I've tried just about everything, but they're still developing. And you hear it in the news every week where it's like, oh, now Claude is ahead of GPT, or some other one of the platforms leapfrog the other on processing or reasoning or and so we're at a stage where, and I don't know how long this will continue, but you sort of have to keep checking back into tools that maybe you loved at first and then things seem to change as the technology evolves. And you have to come back to it and see if it's like, okay, if I'm using this to do landscape analyses, I want it to look and feel like this, and it's not quite doing it. It doesn't mean it will never be able to accomplish that. And so it's worth checking back on those different tools to run processes through. Or, this is where we're still sort of the roles in this world are still emerging. You check back with people like me and Will and say, what's gotten better for this purpose, and we can help you with that. But it's evolving. None of this is static. And I just heard yesterday from somebody say, did it seem like Claude got dumber this week? And it's because he just wasn't getting the same level of like research-based outputs that he had been used to. And so it's just really important to keep checking back. And and I just want to add emphasis on the context gap. I've learned this the hard way too, where it's like, I just want you to tell me, like, should we commit more money to early childhood? And then it's like, well, where is it? What type of programming? What's the community is serving? What's their demographic makeup? Like some that stuff matters. So if you just ask a vague question like, should we fund more early childhood without context, it's going to do a really amazing job of filling gaps. But the more specific you can be, like we're in Minneapolis, we have disproportionate, issues here. How should we be funding into early childhood education? Just
And
help to get better results.
yeah, and before we move to the next slide, something that it's not part of today's conversation is
I
prompting.
lost you. Oh, I lost your sound.
Oh, how about, am I back now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. So I was going to say, even though today we're focusing on prompting, and we have an intro of AI literacy, the tool mismatch happens a lot when the expectation is just what's the best AI? People come to us and say, Ryan, will just shoot it straight. Which AI should I get? And that's not the direction. We even had this Microsoft CEO at Davos early this year. If you guys listen to his speech, he talked about the problem is not the frontier LLM, it's not which one's going to get us matter. It's how are we going to build our processes? So, how do we think about internal processes as an organization? Those are the ones who are going to win because, regardless of the LLM that becomes the better one and the edge one and the more fill in the blanks, your process will be able to adopt it. So, I think that's also another part of the tool mismatch as things are evolving.
Awesome. Thanks, Will. Now we're going to dive a little bit into just best practice, and we've used different acronyms. This one we're putting up for you here is similar to others, and you're getting the message we're repeating over and over again here is context matters. The role you give the AI matters. And so this is an example, which you can see on the left of sort of the description of what each part of it is, and then what you might include as you're moving in or as you're developing a prompt to accomplish a specific task. Will, you want to talk a bit about this and maybe other expansion on it?
Yes. Conceptually, this is the framework. Take a screenshot, you'll get the slides anyway. It doesn't mean you have to get it at the first shot. This is conceptually all the sections that need to be included. The context is critical, the role is critical, the right question. We all know working in impact, the kind of work we do, that unintended consequences are real. And if you don't frame your question right, you can create more problems than what you're trying to solve. That's the same thing with the question. The temperature check is sometimes underestimated. Constraints are good to the LLM. Trying to get everything should not be the goal. You're trying to answer your questions and keep the LLM there. This is the part where the expert in the loop usually kicks in really well. Somebody who understands what you guys are trying to solve will pressure test it and go, why are we getting this answer? Why we're not getting deeper or more specific? This is the part that is critical. Iterative, it's the way to go. Multiple conversations will get you here rather than trying to nail the best prompt at once. Is a back and forth with the LLM. And people who are a little more experienced, like we are, sometimes we make the LLM write the prompt for us as we're going through the conversation. That's also a possibility. So I want to pause a little bit here and see if there's any questions you guys may have about how to prompt for your role. Because again, this is very role, just like we're trying to tell the LLM, you have a role, you have a persona for the work that you do. What is it that you're looking for? So I want to pause here a little bit and see if there are any follow-up questions about what makes a good prompt over what doesn't. And I'm looking at the chat as well if somebody prefers to type it and not um, say it on the mic.
And one thing, as people think, if they have questions, the other thing on the temperature check I always do because I really don't like it when it tells me I'm an amazing person or have a great question or something is remarkable. Uh, I always tell it to maintain objectivity, to use as few adjectives as possible. And I mean, which is different than like, okay, I want to write a lovely letter to my mother-in-law on her birthday. Of course, like make it effusive and engaging, sound really nice. But when I'm doing sort of objective work where I'm like, okay, this is fact-based information. Really work hard to make sure that it's not producing a sort of unconscious bias cycle of like, oh, this makes me feel good. It must be great. And I often will have a follow-up prompt to the initial prompt that says, give me counterpoints to whatever output it produced, just so that I can get to critical depth of thought because it does such a good job of presenting an idea uh, that you're maybe working on, that it takes that extra step of tell me what might be wrong with this, or at least not even wrong, but just give me another perspective on this is really a good follow-up prompt because it will not automatically produce for you objective, critically minded outputs. It's doing its best job to use predictive text on steroids to give you the answer it thinks you want. And so you do have to take that step after you produce this first output of like critically checking the output. So if you're doing a landscape analysis or a grant evaluation, and the first version feels great, even if you generally agree with what it says, I would encourage you to do the follow-on prompt of uh, counter produce counterpoints to the emphasis in this document or whatever it is you're producing.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Ryan. Something that we won't dive into here, this is the initial high level, but we do on the deeper dives we do and the courses we have on actual prompting. There is a concept of the window of memory, the context window that the LLM has, and you will see that once you start interacting, some people tell me, well, I don't like to go too many back and forth because suddenly they kind of forget what they were saying. There are technical, and we go deep enough to explain the reason why, the technical limitations of the LLM, but there are techniques to make sure that that is not happening. Just as an anecdote, I have colleagues who are machine learning engineers, data engineers, who the first prompt they tell their LLM, it's to call them by their nickname. So call me Big Will. And the moment that the LM stops calling me Big Will, I know it's forgetting things, right? The context is getting reduced or it's missing information because that was the first context that I gave it to the LLM. It's not foolproof, it's not a rule, but it's a very funny way to sort of keep track this way to make sure and check that the LLM it's providing you the right information, is not forgetting your context. But that's another temperature check that you can have on your prompt.
Yeah, and and again, this is sort of getting a little deeper, but as you get a number of interactions deep into it, and it starts to forget Big Will, you can sort of take the output or the artifact it produces in its final form and jump to a new chat. So if you want to sort of refresh on its memory in that chat sequence, that's one sort of pro tip on don't just keep going, try to keep going for 200 chats because it'll struggle and it actually burns significantly more tokens if you force it to go back and read everything in that chat before it produces the next output, which is what it does if you stay within the same chat sequence. So if you want to avoid as much energy consumption and token burn, That's another reason to restart a chat is to because then it won't go back and read 1,000 different outputs before it gives you the next answer. This is, the first example is sort of flipped or was sort of the funder side of the table. I know we have some nonprofits uh, on the call as well. So here's an example of starting from like I need to write a letter of inquiry for a funder, how to get from that, knowing I have to accomplish that to developing a prompt that produces the draft of a letter of inquiry. And this is where, in here you can see giving it a role, or the context, who you're applying to, which it will then go and find that program at McKnight Foundation, and pull in relevant information. So you don't have to go find it and copy and paste it and put it in here. That's where it can go. It'll do the work for you. And then, it's going to come at it from a grant writer's perspective, and find best practice on how is an LOI written. Like those are some of the assumes that are like, you can add the context in and make sure it knows that, but it'll likely produce a pretty good output based on what it knows about grant writing. And then even just like 400 words or the number of characters you need. Because then you'll end up getting to like a very close example. This, like when I've done some grant proposals for clients over the last few years, I'll do this exercise and give the character number. I'll pull in, reports that have been released to the public, and it does an amazing job of getting to like 80 to 90% of like, okay, I needed 500 characters to answer this question. And anytime I've done a side-by-side comparison of producing that and then sending it to the folks I'm working with, almost of my own writing, almost always they're like, oh, the AI version is much better. As long as I've given it enough context to make sure it's specific. Because if you don't give it enough context, it writes general statements. And so you have to give it some of these details to make sure it gives you specific answers, which is, oh, shoot, this no jargon. That's one, for example, where it's going to pull in, it's going to find jargon all over the place within an issue area or a sector. And that's identifiable on either side. So whether you're a funder looking at a nonprofit, and if a nonprofit hasn't been specific enough in their prompting, they're going to get sort of jargony outputs that feel very general. I mean, they're not wrong. It's just like these are general statements about affordable housing in this community, versus a sort of clear understanding of, what fits that context. And then, stylistically, even just, you may want to be very objective, professional, not conversational, or if you want it to be more reflective of your own style, you have to give it clear direction on what that is. If it's, I tend to be really informal, relational, but I want to make sure facts are included. So I say that those things a lot of like, make this feel personal, relational, but also make sure the facts that are included have citations. And so it sort of balances those. And it's really up to you to make that context available. And then, like before, this sort of temp check on, what things you want it to not do or to avoid. So this example is saying, don't put a dollar amount in because I want this to be about the idea, starting a conversation, and then getting into the process versus like feeling like this is a proposal right away. And, which, on the nonprofit side is like, it's the risk of getting a fast no, versus having a conversation. Any comments, questions before we keep moving? We're down to the last, probably 10 or 15 minutes. Uh, this one, we're really sort of continuing to emphasize in different words the sort of process we're talking about. I think the two steps I really want to emphasize on this slide is a lot of people get to this number three, generate the output. And we all have to commit to the evaluate and respond. So it's you have to read it, ideally as an expert in the loop on the topic you're working on, or make sure you get input from others on like, is this good? Is it accurate? Does it seem overstated? And I use overstated intentionally just because Hallucinations are almost easier to identify, but overstatements, exaggerations of a fact or data point are really I think, the harder things to look for, where it's like, if it says, oh, this is the most effective, or this is more effective than this, uh, those are the types of things where it's kind of making a statement that says something is better or more effective, or where you should pressure test it. And you can do that by taking that statement, putting it back into the chat and say, validate this, pressure test this, make sure it's accurate to, the claim it's making, because that's where, especially in this kind of work in philanthropy and nonprofits and impacts on people's lives, we want to make sure we're not making a statement like this program is more effective than another one just based on the AI without doing some sort of steps to pressure test it. And it might be right, but the follow-up or the loop you continue is then um, continue to ask follow-up questions and to look for citations or whatever input you need to validate the information. And this is something we have always done in this kind of work of like, oh, I read this study. Does it line up with this other study I read? There are some differences. Um, and I want to understand what those differences are. And that's, those debates exist within any sort of issue, housing, education, jobs, health, like all of these topics have competing perspectives. And so that can show up in the AI tool as well, where it's like it's emphasizing one perspective over another. And so this sort of interaction in this work is really critical and something we do normally. And it's sort of like trying to translate that critical thinking into how you kind of stay in this prompting loop.
Yeah,
Well,
that is very true, Ryan. I want to add from my experience, I agree 100% with everything Ryan said. From my experience, one critical point, because it is a continuous running loop, right? It's number one. Um, the first time that in my professional work, I had to get an intern, I spent about a week preparing for my intern, right? What are the documents? What can my intern do? What cannot do? Where should I say, come to me for questions? It became a whole prepping session. And when that internship was done, the loop to feedback, the lessons learned, and what will be, that is your AI. Your AI it's eager, it's got horsepower to process thousands of documents in the blink of an eye, has no context. So it cannot replace your knowledge. So spend some time. I spend time with a piece of paper or talking to a microphone where I clarify my idea first, the goal, and then I go through the actual prompting, the output, continue the loop. And then because of that, I get to clarify the idea even better. And it becomes this cycle that enables you to do it better, more effectively than just faster. Faster should never be the goal when you're working with an LLM. Otherwise, you will just do an automation. So that, in my opinion, it's a good starting point in that cycle that follows what Ryan said. You have to evaluate, you have to continue that loop.
we'll keep moving. Um, this is really just examples of workflows or prompting sequences that you can move into narrative development, researching, oh, I think there's a typo, nonprofit or funder research. So depending on which sort of side of the table you're on, if you're a funder, uh, you can very easily do a bunch of research on a nonprofit, the community in which they operate, going through a prompt sequence, strategic communications, similar sort of thing of like, here's our program, what we do, the outcomes, the context of the community, how do we develop an annual report or some sort of white paper on what we want to be communicating about the work. This all can be sort of processed out and built into prompts that produce the product. And it may feel like a lot of work, but I promise you, if you take the 20 minutes, an hour to think through process, prompts, you can develop a final product in a fraction of the time
Yeah.
And it's not, this isn't to the point of like, I think it's done. It does take some thoughtful work to produce it, but it can produce really great tools for you. Board presentations, again, I would say from all the people I've worked with, the organizations I've worked in over the years, like this is one of the most challenging things on a quarterly basis or whatever you're doing is board prep, getting that presentation right, making sure the things you need to be reporting on, the things you're recommending. You can take process you've already done, document it, and then start thinking about the prompts to really do that prep well for it, and you'll save time, and you actually might get to greater depth of thought than you've been able to before because of time limits. Landscape analysis, I've mentioned a few times, it's probably one of the most interesting things to people in using AI is I want to understand this issue in this context, where the gaps are, where funding is happening, what organizations are doing. Normally it would cost tens of thousands of dollars hiring a research agency. You can now get pretty far down the path yourself in a sort of series of prompts. This is one of the main things we're building into Compleer is a series of 6 really detailed prompts that help just guide you through landscape analysis steps. And then similarly, strategic planning. So I like this one because all you have to do is take the normal process you'd go through on a quarterly or annual basis, map it out, and then start building prompts to accomplish some of those tasks or inform that step. And you can get to some depth of thought on financials, program design and evolution, deliverables at a staff level that normally would take you many hours, if not weeks worth of time to develop. Um, Comments, questions. We're going to do a little bit of what's coming. We're getting to the end of our time. Will, you want to kind of cruise through this?
Yeah, very quickly. So what to pay attention to, what a little bit overhyped. Um, these are not ranked in importance. These are the top 4 that we've identified in conversations. But for you to keep in mind, as of today, and again, AI changes really quickly. This may be different in a month from now. So come back to us always to double check. But it's not replacing people at all. Relationships are critical. We've been talking about processes, right? Whomever understands and run the process will be on top. Anything that is fully autonomous, be really careful. I've been doing grant writing, grant drafting for over a year with nonprofits. Not even near that. It creates great results in your process, but it doesn't. You don't click a button and you get a grant written for you. Same thing about your strategic planning is not one click and done. It requires a lot of thought and conversation. And AI doesn't know anything. It has a lot, it's a predictive model, and it will go and fetch the most plausible answer. So trying to say, well, I asked AI and suddenly the answers of numbers are here, more hype than anything. What is underhyped? Synthesize. It can go through a lot of volume really quickly. And if you have an understanding and you can double check it, you're expert in the loop if it's not you, can really reduce the time it consumes. That iterative drafting that back and forth for people who are not great writers, I'm raising my hand right here. This is the opportunity to just speed up the process much faster for you. We talked about the stage 3 of the evolution, this transferable of prompts. Now you can work as a unit. It's not just me and my desk, but it's with my colleagues, with my peers, within my organization, within my community. If I go further in the state or the country, you can have some good collaboration now because of it. The ability to customize your instructions. When we do more in-depth workshops on prompting, I share the amount of transfer skills that my projects and my folders have in Claude and ChatGPT. And once you master one, you can transfer those instructions to multiple projects. This is the voice that I want. This is the tone. This is the depth, etc. So those are things that are under hype right now, and they're really good gains for supporting your work.
Awesome. Thanks, Will. One comment on the knows your community. It does not and cannot, will not know your community, but what it can do, especially if your community does do community surveys, that sort of thing, is it can take quantitative research plus community survey, and this is where it kind of comes into synthesis and say, okay, oh, it's like now we can actually take volumes of information together, quantitative, qualitative, and then start to get to synthesis and analysis in a different way than we've ever been able to. It doesn't mean it knows your community, but if you give it community information, it can help you get to like analysis and depth of thought faster than, the 6 months it takes to analyze data. This is just a quick sort of tool highlight. We're not promoting these necessarily in any way, and we actually wanted to edit this slide, but ran out a little bit of time just because ChatGPT and Claude are sort of very similar. They have, depending who you talk to, some people love ChatGPT, some people love Claude, but they are the sort of biggest dogs in the new LLM tools to produce work products for us. Gemini, Copilot, we encourage everybody to try these just because almost everybody has them embedded in their workspaces. And so they can function as independent LLMs like Claude and ChatGPT, and they're also incredible work tools inside your platform to edit, format, develop presentations that if you have some significant security protocols and you can't work outside of that workspace in an LLM, make sure you're maximizing the use of these tools inside your LLM. And then, one little promo of CompClear, but only because it's built on top of, right now it's built on top of Claude. And so this is a tool, there are purpose-built tools emerging that help us to accomplish niche work. And so this was designed for research and evaluation within philanthropy and nonprofit organizations. Very specific to it. If you jump in there, start clicking on the buttons, like, oh, this is all like oriented to like impact in people's lives or to the planet, and what sort of evidence we're using to support that work. And so you'll start to see more and more of these purpose-built tools emerge that help accomplish niche purposes. In the last couple of minutes, we just want to highlight we will be we as Will has mentioned, we do have a few 3-session series designed that we will start to push out in the next week probably, where we've heard from the 600 or 700 people that have been in these free sessions. Do you have anything that is sequential from 101 to this point, or from prompting to doing this work with other people? So that's where these ideas have come from. And we will be charging something for this. And so we're going to roll that out. It's going to be still very accessible. But we're going to go from 101 in the free sessions to 201 and 301 and get deeper. And then subsequent to this we will begin offering group coaching sessions. So if you want to join a group of issue focused people, so if you're all focused on early childhood or something like that, or groups of executive directors, all sort of trying to figure out how do we lead our organizations as an AI enabled organizations. We'll start rolling those out, and we're just in the final stages of putting together a website and all that stuff to roll it out. And then, just keep coming back to the free sessions. We do these every week. Will and I are on every Wednesday with something. So you all registered through our Luma page or the CompClear Luma page. Go back there. There's a number of sessions already laid out for the next number of months. And then on every Friday, I do a CompClear walkthrough, sort of open office hours. So if you want to see that tool specifically, I do it every Friday at 11 a.m. Central Time. I'd love to have you there and walk you through it. So with that, I want to just thank everybody for your time. We probably don't even have time for any more questions, but we are available to you. We'll make sure to follow up so you have all of our contact information. We'll probably can dump his into the chat quick.
Yeah.
And then we'll make sure to follow up. But we appreciate your time. I hope we see you back in one of these free sessions and wish you the best in your work.
Yeah, and don't hesitate to reach out. Just let us know any questions that you may have. Well, thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining. Not missing anything from